The SNP, I'm just reading a tweet from Megan Gallagher, who up until the other day I never even heard of. The SNP is in total meltdown. Yesterday I challenged Humza Yousaf over the chaos engulfing the SNP. He is yet to suspend any SNP member over the current police investigation into his party's finances. That pretty much says it all, really, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, it's not, I mean, I love this stuff. You suspend this and suspend the next. And I mean, you know, one problem obviously is under, Nicola Sturgeon. I mean, the SNP used to suspend people with a drop of a hat.
Right.
You know, I mean, there was a famous case of Michelle Thompson, who wasn't actually being investigated. It was a lawyer that was being investigated, and she got encouraged to resign the whip. But generally speaking, I would say you tend not to suspend people until they're charged.
Yes.
I would say, because natural justice. I mean, natural justice is an interesting thing. There's lots of folk, perhaps like Megan Gallagher, who think that natural justice is something that applies to them, but not to other people. Well, it applies to everybody.
Well, exactly. I mean, Westminster's had its own problems with this as well, haven't they? Whether they suspend somebody, because if they suspend them, then they automatically identify them as somebody who might be the subject of an inquiry. But
I thought incidentally, Dominic Raab was looking a bit peaky yesterday, sitting next to. Did you notice that? Well, he looked like he was elsewhere.
He always looks a bit like that, though, doesn't he? Yeah, I think so. I mean, this bullying allegation against him seems to me to be, depending on who you believe, either going to be awful for him or going to be no problem at all. You know, because,
or somewhere in between.
Or somewhere in between, which is probably the truth. But I mean, we just have to wait and see. But I mean, it seems to me it's not a definitive report of any kind. So whatever is in it will not necessarily lead to anything.
It's quite interesting. I mean, I read somewhere that it's going to be a description as opposed to a proscription.
Yes. Well, also listening to the guy from the Public Service Union talking about some of the activities that went on under Dominic Raab's watch. I mean, a lot of it doesn't sound terribly serious to me, like somebody getting a phone call to be asked why he hadn't done something. It doesn't sound like bullying, really, does it?
Oh, no, in today's civil service.
I mean, how dare you?
Being asked to do something, come on.
I mean, absolutely ridiculous.
Behave.
But, I mean, let's look at what's going on up there. We've got Scottish questions, First Minister's questions at midday, which we might be taking a little peek at later on. Humza Yousaf, the continuity First Minister, as we're calling him.
He so regrets it. I'm sure he must go to bed every night and go, God, I wish I hadn't said that.
When Megan Gallagher sort of had a go at him the other day in Scottish Parliament, his best answer was that I'd rather be standing here in charge than be part of the opposition. And I thought to myself, you probably don't, actually. You'd probably rather be in the opposition at this moment, wouldn't you?
Well, that's right. I mean, Humza must be stealing himself. He'll be sitting up in the First Ministerial office, thinking, I wonder what they're going to ask me to do.
Yes. And, of course, Nicola Sturgeon more than likely isn't going to be there. I'm not sure where she's going to be. But even the SNP, we're told, are now expecting her to be arrested, sort of imminently.
Well, I mean, we'll see what happens. I mean, that's based on the theory of signatories to the accounts.
Yes.
Peter Burrell was a signatory, that Colin Beattie, the treasurer, a thoroughly nice guy, incidentally.
Well, he's stepped back from his role, hasn't he?
Yes, he's the only person that has
suspended himself.
Yes. Incidentally, I mean, obviously, I'm sad it's what happened to my old party, but the tears that you see are something to do with hay fever and all these buds that are floating around London at the present. I mean, it's really surprising you can get hay fever in London, but you can.
Oh, you can, totally. Yeah, the plane trees actually are the things that give it to you, because it's the pollen that comes off the trees at this time of year.
I'll watch out for that.
Yeah,
I'll wear glasses in future.
Yes, you should. I was wondering if you were getting a bit doe-eyed about, the old
I thought I should
former colleagues.
I've been deliberately trying to get the tears running. No, but actually, I mean, people ask me, they keep phoning me up from all places. I get dozens of phone calls every day saying you must be jumping for joy, and the reality is, no, I did spend 2 decades and more building up the SNP from nothing at all to being the dominant force in Scottish politics. So there's kind of a big emotion that you don't like seeing the disintegration of something that took a long time to build up.
And it has been incredibly fast. I mean, I was just talking to somebody last night, just before I was on Jeremy Carl's show, about the speed of the kind of demise of just Nicola Sturgeon herself, even if nothing else happens to her, from only a few weeks ago saying there's plenty left in the tank, Jacinda Ardern might have gone, but I'm still here, and then suddenly that was the end.
Well, of course, it's part of the power. Power tends to drain from people very quickly.
Yeah.
And people anticipate the draining of power. And all the kind of yes people, the yes men and women who were prepared to look aside and look elsewhere, all of a sudden discover their consciences again. I mean, I was interested in the new deputy leader yesterday sort of saying, well, actually, maybe things weren't really as good as they should have been with Nicola in charge. Now, she wouldn't have said that a month ago. On the contrary, she would have said Nicola was the best thing since sliced bread. Something that hasn't been really reported in this, which I feel very angry about, one of the worst aspects of what we know about this is that there's at least a dozen people, maybe more actually, but certainly a dozen that I could name, people who ask questions about the finances. Maybe did no more than said, look, something's not quite right here. And these people had their careers, they were sacked, sidelined, sent to Siberia.
Yeah.
I mean, they had their careers diminished because they had the temerity to do their job.
Yes.
Even up to, you might argue, the deputy leader, Keith Brown, who was actually elected, the Keith Brown, a chap called Keith Brown, he was elected by the party, and he's been, I think I'm right, been sacked from the cabinet twice. He's the deputy leader.
Right.
But other people much more savagely, sort of kept off the candidates list. Joanna Cherry, who whatever you might think of the result, defeated the Prime Minister in the English High Courts.
Yes.
And finds
She's a
herself,
significant figure.
Yes, finds herself swept away as the justice spokesman for, somebody who probably would have difficulty explaining the division of powers in the English courts. Certainly has no great expertise in the justice system. So people, and they try to stop them becoming candidates. And you trace it back, and you find the common thread is these are all people who said something about finance. And wait a minute, things aren't as they should be.
Yes.
And it's absolutely disgraceful. These people have been victimised in the way they've been. And there's hardly any publicity. I mean, there's lots of publicity about the people who looked the other way, but there's not so much publicity about the people who didn't and suffered as a result.
And then suffered. Because what ended up happening with Nicola Sturgeon's kind of party, as it was, because it was her party, became her party. When you were leader, you had Nicola Sturgeon, who was able to become your successor when that point came.
It seemed like a good idea at the time.
Well, it did, yes. I mean, you could be blamed for all of that, by the way.
I know. I go to bed at night wondering about that.
It's like Kevin O'Sullivan says, I was the guy that gave Piers Morgan a job at the Sun, and so it's all his fault.
No, wait a minute, that's much worse.
Yeah, it is. So the thing is, right, that you had a sort of a line of succession available to the party, which was great. However, for her, it became a cult of personality, and to be part of that cult, not only did you have to be in absolute adoration of the leader, but you also had to go along with all the wokery, and the wokery which inevitably killed the party off, because it was the end of her that came at that moment when she tried to explain why a trans woman couldn't go to a female prison. Well, I mean, there's a bit worse than that, actually. Being Nicola's heir apparent at any point in time was a very dangerous thing to be. If you chart the history of the last few years, I mean, things seem to befall, the next leader but one when Nicola was in charge. But yes, that was dramatic, as we've discussed many times. I mean, Nicola, a master of communications, and yet suddenly struck dumb, effectively, when asked, the simplest of questions. I mean, she's not the only politician who can't answer that question, incidentally, but nonetheless, it was a, the Queen has no clothes on sort of moment, wasn't it? Yes, and you could almost see in her eyes, as she was failing to answer it, that she knew that was the moment. And I said, I think the first time I saw it, you should have had a big explosion going off behind her, because that was the end of her career. But, I mean, what do you think drove her to become that woke individual? Why did she go down that road? I honestly have no idea. I mean, I knew Nicola for a long time, or thought I did at least, but there was not even an inkling that she'd be an enthusiast for woke ideology, never mind identity politics. Nothing whatsoever. Maybe I was too busy speaking about independence for Scotland. I don't know. Maybe I just didn't see it. But no, I don't think so. This is something which is much, much more recent. I mean, there is a theory, of course, that Nicola had been First Minister for a long time, but didn't have a great legislative achievement. Yes. I introduced... No legacy. Yeah, I introduced equal marriage. I thought that was a really important thing to do. It was very controversial at the time, much less so now.
But I wouldn't have regarded that as my greatest achievement. I mean, that was something I did because I thought it was the right thing to do.
Right.
I thought the progress towards independence was my greatest achievement. So, but maybe she felt that she needed some sort of legislation which would be her legacy.
They all do, don't they? Some of these, I mean, politicians, I talk about them as if you're not one, but you are, obviously.
Well,
but,
really,
Tony Blair, kind of fell on the altar of the Iraq War because he thought that he would be standing shoulder to shoulder with George Bush and that would be his legacy of freeing up the Middle East, when in fact all he did was set fire to it.
Well, it's very difficult. If you see that famous picture of him imitating Bush's behaviour, with the fingers on the gun bit, if you remember, at the ranch.
Yes.
And at the very least, Blair thought, I'm really the vice president.
Yes.
Even if I can't be president because of the unfortunate point I wasn't unlike Boris Johnson, born in America. At least I can be the effective international vice president of the United States. I mean, yes, there was an element of that. Or alternatively, of course, people might just go mad in office.
Yes.
I mean, look, I was the only one that was still sane after.
Well, it's true. I mean, if you get, if you sort of voluntarily step down, you remain sane. It's the same in newspapers. The only inevitability is you will get fired at the end. It will always be unpleasant at the end, and every Downing Street sort of scene is somebody being dragged out kicking and screaming. Gordon Brown was
well, that's right. Well, he didn't. Usually they say it's 10 years. I mean, the Margaret Thatcher line was when Margaret Thatcher started to think the poll tax was a great idea. That's when you thought, wait a minute.
Yes.
But that was she managed to retain sanity for a long time.
She did, but she didn't want to go even when she did go.
No, she was clear that it wasn't hay fever on her part.
No, it wasn't.
She was in the back of the car.
And of course, the other funny thing about Blair was that he crossed that Rubicon where he gets to the point where where you hear politicians say, or prime ministers say, well, sometimes some of the decisions we have to make are unpopular. And that's when you know that they've kind of jumped the shark.
Yeah, but I mean, it's easy in retrospect, Mike, because you can look back and say, oh, look at that. But there was a speech, I think the 2001 Labour conference. I remember Clinton was out of office and there, and Blair was making a speech about how, this neoliberal stuff, we can invade Africa and introduce democracy. We've got the power to do this. We can introduce democratic liberalism to every country on earth. We just need enough armies, preferably American, to do it. And I actually remember it because Clinton was on the stage, and Clinton, even Bill Clinton didn't think this was a great idea.
Right, exactly. Let's get back to what's going on in Scotland, though. I mean, as far as what is happening inside the SNP, I mean, we keep reading reports that there are now factions sort of splitting all over the place. There is a fear that they've got so little money now because all their donations have dried up that as a political entity they may be no more.
Well, I mean, there's certainly difficulties. I mean, you wouldn't want to be an SNP fundraiser at the present moment. Quite apart from the fact that the cops might come round, but you wouldn't want to be a new SNP fundraiser at the present moment because it would be a challenge. I mean, the SNP is still a powerful organisation. I mean, I don't think for a second, incidentally, that even 72,000 was its real membership in terms of people it paid. But nonetheless, it's a much bigger party than all of the other parties in Scotland put together. So I wouldn't write off the SNP. Nonetheless, there is an enormous challenge. The brand has been severely damaged. And those of us, who obviously care about the SNP, as I still do, but care about independence more, have really got to concentrate on how to make sure that the independence cause isn't damaged by the SNP brand. And I'm doing a speech in Arbroath, if I can just do a quick advert.
Yeah, do.
With an old comrade of mine, Jim Sillars. We haven't actually spoken on a platform since the referendum together. And we haven't always seen eye to eye, but we're speaking tonight in Arbroath. And we'll have something to say about how we can make the independence movement not be undermined by the trials and tribulations of the SNP. Because remember, what's happening just now, I mean, the SNP support is slipping in most polls, as you would expect. but independence support's strong. I mean, it's 47%.
So people are looking for somewhere else to go then with independence, because Hamza Yusuf up to now, as far as I can see, and I haven't read every Kevin McKenna column there is to read. But
there's quite a few instances. Kevin has a number of outlets.
Yes, he does indeed.
Like yourself.
Indeed. And but Yusuf, as far as I can see, hasn't said much about independence, but he has said that he's going to challenge the British government in the courts over this ridiculous Gender Recognition Act.
Well, look, I mean, this is... I mean, both sides of that are mad, incidentally. I mean, if you look at his... I mean, to be fair to him, I mean, obviously, his announcement of his legislative programme, his ideas, was kind of overshadowed by the arrest of the party treasurer that day.
Well, it would be, wouldn't it?
Well, it would. but so, you know, you might say it wasn't entirely a fair chance, but nonetheless, his speech seemed to be the pre-prepared speech, and there was very little, next to nothing, about independence. When somebody did one of these word searches and found it didn't appear at all. But, you know, he's decided to challenge the UK government and the courts on self-identification. Now, the problem with the challenge to self-identification is not the challenge to the UK government. You know, if I was First Minister just now, I'd be challenging it all over the place. But you were very good at it, because you always challenged things that you knew they could never give you, and that way it made it look as if you were the man who was being shortchanged. Did you see through that?
I'm afraid so.
Oh, goodness.
I've always said that you were very good at that.
And also, I tried to make sure that the people were with me.
Yeah, they always were.
You know, but something that...
because you'd always whipped them up into the idea that we want this, we're going to get it, we're going to go and get it, and then they said, no, you can't have it.
Sometimes they whip me up, Mike.
It's true.
There's something... I mean, there's plenty of stuff. You're not short of challenges at the present moment. I mean, you know, I know it's May, but, you know, people are still shivering in Scotland at the present moment.
Well, he's also
cold nights, and you know, this most energy-rich country in Europe, bar Norway, and folk are shivering in their homes. Let's have a challenge on that.
Well, exactly right. Hamza Yusuf, apparently, by the way, is listed as an international guest for the coronation. So, I mean, that's something you could also challenge. But